Hey Hedgehogs, it's Paul Scheider. I am joining you right now from one of my favorite wilderness areas. This is a place called Greensfelder Park. It is just outside of St. Louis in Eureka, Missouri. And this is a park where I have spent a lot of time growing up and practicing all the different survival skills over the years. So I've got a lot of good memories in this place and a couple of bad ones too, but I'll save that for a different video. But anyway, the reason I'm making this video right now is to start answering a question that I get by email, and it's a question that I get a lot. And so what I have is a lot of folks writing in and asking me what sort of gear I carry with me into the wilderness, you know, whether that's for a short-term day hike or something more extended like a survival trip or anything else in between. And so I'm going to start answering that question, and I'm going to have to do it through a series of videos because the gear that I take with me in this backpack right here, there's a good amount of it, and there is a lot of philosophy and thought process behind the reason why each individual thing is in this backpack and why I take it with me. And on that note, I want to also mention that the process of building the perfect kit, so to speak, is something that's really a never-ending evolution. And by no means have I got the perfect kit. I have what is the best for me right now, but I'm always learning from other people and learning from my own failures out in the wilderness and then tweaking that and doing my best effort to upgrade my kit and be more prepared for the same thing next time. Also on that note is kind of the balance and philosophy of how much gear to bring, because the whole intention in my mind of going out in the woods is actually to go and do with less equipment. But there is an importance and, in my opinion, a necessity to bring some amount of modern gear with you, if for no other reason to have safety, so that if you do get in some kind of rough situation and you get in over your head, you've at least got a plan B and you've got a way to comfortably stay alive and well. The other side of it is, if you go out in the woods with the sole intention of practicing primitive skills, but you get to a point out there where you're so incredibly uncomfortable, you're also then at a point where you're not really learning and absorbing the lessons that you need to learn. So I think it's important to stay comfortable when you go out so that you can have focus and the presence of mind to give attention to whatever one skill it is that you're intending to learn at that time. Anyway, the thing that I'm going to show you today is how to make your own homemade tinder. And what tinder is, for those of you that don't know, is the very first line that you're going to use for making a fire. It's the dry, fluffy stuff that's going to catch a spark very easily. For example, if you're using a ferro rod fire starter or whatever method you're using, it's going to generate that initial heat and flame so that you can build the rest of your fire around it. And I think that the importance of tinder is often overlooked because most anybody carries some kind of fire starting device, but the other half of it is having that tinder so that you can actually have, you know, a substantial flame to build that fire around it. And when you're out in the woods or any wilderness environment, the times that you're going to need a fire most are also the times when it's typically the most difficult to build one. So for example, if it's very cold and wet and windy, you're going to need some kind of heat source oftentimes to maintain your body heat. But that's also the most difficult time to go out in the woods and procure, you know, the amazing dry fluffy tinder, because it might just be soaking wet. So in your emergency kit or your survival kit or whatever you want to call it, it's a great idea to have readily available dry tinder that is waterproof and cannot come into harm's way at all, so that you can reliably get a fire started if you need to. That's what I'm going to show you right now. So there are essentially three different things that you're going to need in order to make this tinder kit. The first one is called jute twine. It is spelled J-U-T-E, and this is just a natural fiber twine that is available at almost any hardware store and a lot of craft stores too. And the reason I like it so much is because you've got the twine, which you can use for any purpose where you need a piece of cordage, but then when you unravel it into its individual strands, you can then take those and separate them out and buff them in your hands, and it creates this very thin, very fibrous ball of material. And when you hit this with a spark, it will erupt into flames almost instantly and give you a lot of heat and a lot of flame very quickly. So all by itself, this is great tinder. But we are going to improve upon it by adding into the equation some Gulf wax. This is paraffin wax. The brand is Gulf Wax. You can get this at pretty much any grocery store. It comes in these white bricks inside the box. And what we're going to do is we're going to melt this down and dip our jute twine in it. And what that does is, number one, it gives it some degree of water resistance to the twine. But it's also, and more importantly, going to make it burn a lot longer and a lot hotter than if we were just using the twine by itself. And then the final thing that we're going to add into the equation is a waterproof container. This is made by Nalgene. It's just a smaller Nalgene bottle essentially. These are also very widely available. I'm sure you can find one on the internet somewhere. And I have no doubt that if we put the tinder in here, seal it down tight, it's going to stay dry through the worst of conditions. Okay, so I just fired up my stove, and one thing to keep in mind is use an old junk pot that you don't really care about, because once you get wax on the inside of that, it's going to be very difficult to get it out. Other than that, just take your paraffin, drop it right in, and melt it kind of slow, because there is a temperature, and I don't know what it is, that the wax can actually catch on fire. And if you have a big flaming pot of wax, it can be very, very dangerous. So put it on low heat, melt it slow, just like I'm doing, and I'll catch you back in a sec. Okay, so the wax is all melted, and I've got my lengths of jute twine all cut. So now what I'm going to do is just take some and dump them in a couple at a time and stir them around and make sure that all of the lengths of twine get completely submerged. I've got a tweezers that I'm using here to keep me from getting my fingers burned. You could fish it out of there with a stick, of course, but this is quick and easy. And once they've been submerged, let them drip off a little bit, and then pull them out and just lay them out to dry. It'll probably take 5 to 10 minutes to fully dry. And then just go ahead and do this with all the lengths of twine. Okay, so all of my jute has been out of the wax for about 15 minutes now, and this is what it looks like. As you can see, it's starting to stiffen up because all of the wax is hardening. And now the only thing left to do is start packing it inside of your waterproof container. And the reason before why I told you to cut a double length, in other words, twice the length of the container, is because once you start cramming all this jute in there, it gets a little bit tight. And what you can do is insert it the midsection and then just take a stick and push the tinder straight down in there, and it'll allow you to really fill this thing up to the maximum capacity. Okay, now let's go ahead and do a little side-by-side performance comparison. On the top here I have the paraffin treated jute twine, and on the bottom this is the fresh stuff with no treatment from the wax at all. And I'm going to go ahead and dunk both of these into this pail of water here, and I'm just going to swish them around and give each piece of jute every opportunity to get completely soaked. And first I'm going to show you the non-treated jute. As you can see, this is soaked to the core. And even as I unravel this, all the tiny fibrous strands inside of it are also soaking wet. So in the condition that this is in right now, I would not be able to start a fire with this because it's just too damp. At best, I might be able to dry it out by using body heat, putting it in between layers of clothing, and hope for the best, but it might not be good enough, particularly if there was a hypothermia situation. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the paraffin treated jute. It's wet on the outside. I can shake most of that off pretty easily. And now I'm just going to go ahead and separate this out. And I'm going to go ahead and pick apart just one of the 6 fibers that make up the main piece. So I'm going to go ahead and set those other 5 aside, and let's take a look at this. it is still dry and fluffy on the inside, because when we dipped it in that hot wax, that wax just went straight through and coated all of these little individual fibers. So this is nice and dry, when just a moment ago it was completely submerged in water. So now that we've got that, let's go ahead and do a little performance comparison on the flame. I've got another piece of jute here. This is untreated jute, and I'm going to go ahead and take out one of the 6 strands, again just for fair comparison. Separate it out into the thin fibers, and I'll go ahead and set these side by side. I will do my best to strike them at the same time with the spark from this. Get them a little closer. So as you can see here, the non-treated one is dying down. There's a little bit of flame left, but it's practically out right now. And the wax-treated jute is still going strong. And again, that's only one of 6 fibers and about a 6-inch length of cordage here. So there's a lot more. And as you saw before, you can pack an awful lot of this stuff inside one of those waterproof containers. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. By now, you have learned how to take some basic household items and make tinder that is impervious to water. And I think if you put it in a container like this one, you can be confident that it will survive and stay dry in the worst of conditions. So I think this tinder kit would make a great addition to your wilderness pack, and I will look forward to sharing more items like this from my pack with you in the future. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the website at hedgehogleatherworks.com. There is a section called the campfire that is loaded with information on wilderness survival. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Paul Scheider, and I'll see you next time.